Her sleeve slipped while reaching for the window latch, revealing bruises she'd hidden under powder and prayers. The maid whispered something about falling downstairs, but the Mafia boss saw what she couldn't hide, the terror in her eyes. What she didn't know, he'd just decided she was under his protection, and in Palermo, when Celio Falaschi made a promise, even the law stepped aside. Celio Falaschi didn't believe in accidents. At 7:13 a.m., he sat in his private study overlooking the terracotta rooftops of Palermo, reviewing shipping manifests that would put most men to sleep. But Celio wasn't most men. He was the kind of man who noticed everything. The half-breath pause before someone answered a question, the way hands trembled when holding a glass, the deliberate way people avoided his gaze when they were hiding something. So when Triana Patino entered his study carrying fresh linens, he noticed immediately that her sleeves were pulled down too far. Not just down, stretched. The fabric bunched at her wrists, clutched tightly in her fists like she was holding herself together, or hiding something. "Buongiorno, Signor Falaschi," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It always was. In the 4 months she'd worked at Villa Falaschi, he'd never heard her speak louder than a murmur. "Morning, Triana." He watched her cross the room, her movements too careful, too practiced. She approached the window to adjust the drapes, and that's when it happened. She reached for the brass latch, and the sleeve slipped. Just for a second, maybe 2. But it was enough. Dark purple bruises wrapped around her wrists like ugly rings, sis. Some were fresh, deep violet and angry. Others were fading to that sickly yellow-green color that meant they were days old, maybe a week. And there, barely visible beneath the powder she'd tried to blend into her cheekbone, was the shadow of another bruise. His eyes caught them before she yanked her sleeve back down, and he saw her freeze mid-reach. She knew he'd seen. "Triana," he said calmly, setting down his pen. "Sit." "Oh, I should really finish the sit." It wasn't loud. Celio never needed to be loud, but something in his tone made people obey. She lowered herself into the leather chair across from his desk, looking like she wanted to disappear into the cushions. "What happened to your wrist?" "Nothing. Ignore. I'm just clumsy." She forced a smile that looked like it hurt. "I tripped on the stairs last night." Hit the railing. Celio leaned back in his chair, studying her. Triana Patino was 26. He knew this from her employment file. Petite. With dark hair, she always wore a tight braid and brown eyes that rarely made contact with his. She was efficient, silent, and she never asked questions. Those were the qualities his housekeeper, Elena Conti, had praised when recommending her. But Elena hadn't mentioned the fear, because that's what Celio saw now. Not embarrassed about being clumsy. Fear, raw, real, buried under forced politeness. "Both wrists?" he asked gently, noticing how she was unconsciously rubbing her other arm. Triana's face went pale. "See, I told you, I'm very clumsy." "Show me." "Signor Falaschi, really, I'm Triana." He kept his voice soft but unyielding. "Show me." Her hands trembled as she slowly pulled back both sleeves. The marks were identical, finger-shaped bruises, 4 on top, 1 underneath, where a thumb would press. Someone had grabbed her, hard, recently. Celio felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. He had built an empire in the shadows of Palermo. He'd done things that kept him awake some nights, made decisions that blurred the line between power and cruelty. But he had rules. Lines he didn't cross. And one of those lines was simple. You didn't hurt people who couldn't fight back. Someone had hurt Triana. Someone had grabbed this woman, who worked under his roof, in his home, hard enough to leave marks that looked days old. And she was terrified enough to lie about it. Who did this? No one. I told you Triana. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his voice low and deliberate. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to understand something." Her eyes finally met his, wide, dark, frightened. "You work in my house, under my roof. That means you're under my protection. Do you understand? For a moment, he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted. He could see her weighing options, calculating risks, measuring trust against fear. Then she stood abruptly. I really should finish my work. The kitchen needs Triana. But she was already backing toward the door. Thank you for your concern, Signor Falassi. I'll be more careful. And then she was gone, practically fleeing from the room. Celio sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the door she'd closed behind her. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person in this house he trusted with his life. Elena, my office. Now. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. 3 minutes later, his housekeeper appeared. Elena Conti had worked for the Falassi family for 28 years. She was 60, sharp as Sicilian steel, and one of the few people unafraid to tell Celio when he was wrong. You summoned me, Don Celio? She said dryly, closing the door. Triana, tell me about her. Elena's expression shifted immediately. What happened? She's hurt. Bruises on both wrists. Finger marks. On her face, too, hidden under makeup. She's terrified. And she's lying about it. Madonna. Elena sank into the chair Triana had just fled from. I didn't know. I swear, Celio, I didn't know. What do you know about her personal life? Not much. She's very private. I know she's not from Palermo originally. She came here a few months before I hired her. She mentioned once that she was staying with a cousin in Borgo Vecchio. I need work desperately. Why desperately? Elena hesitated. She didn't say, but I got the sense she was running from something, or someone. Celio's jaw tightened. I want to know where she goes after work. Don't follow her yourself, have Rico handle it. Discreet. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to, who's been near her. You think it's someone from her past? I think someone grabbed her hard enough to leave marks, Celio said quietly. And she's too scared to name them. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city he controlled from the shadows. Find out who it is, Elena. His voice was calm, but beneath it was something colder, something that made even Elena Conti take a step back. And when you do, Celio added, his reflection dark against the Palermo morning, make sure Rico brings me everything. Phone records, addresses, photos. What are you going to do? Celio's fingers curled around the window frame. Whatever I have to. What Celio didn't yet know was that the man who'd hurt Triana wasn't just dangerous. He was untouchable. And the war Celio was about to start wouldn't be fought with bullets. It would be fought with secrets, power, and the one thing the law feared most, the truth. Elena returned 2 hours later with a file that was disappointingly thin. This is everything I could gather without raising suspicion, she said, laying a manila folder on Celio's desk. Employment application, reference letters, and what I remember from our conversations. Celio opened it. The application was sparse, almost deliberately so. Name, Triana Patino. Age, 26. Previous employment, domestic staff, private residence, Barcelona. Reason for leaving, employer relocated. Emergency contact, blank. No emergency contact, Celio noted. She said she'd fill it in later, never did. He scanned the reference letter, generic praise, professionally distant, nothing personal, nothing that revealed who Triana actually was. What did she tell you about herself? Elena settled into the chair, her expression thoughtful. Not much, and I didn't push. She said she'd moved to Palermo for a fresh start after a difficult breakup, needed distance from her ex. She was polite, competent, and clearly desperate for legitimate work. Desperate how? The way she asked about payment schedules, whether she could be paid weekly instead of monthly, if there was staff housing available. Elena paused. The way someone asks when they're running out of options. Celio's fingers drummed against the desk. Family? She never mentions any. No parents, no siblings. Once I asked if she had anyone to spend Christmas with, and she changed the subject so quickly I didn't ask again. Friends? None that I've seen. She doesn't socialize with the other staff. Brings her lunch, eats alone, leaves exactly at 6. Always 6? Like clockwork. Which is unusual. Most of the staff will stay late if there's extra work, earn overtime. Not Triana. 6 o'clock, she's gone. Celio closed the file. Something was wrong. Not with Elena's observations, with the picture they painted. Triana Patino was a ghost. No roots, no connections, no past she was willing to share. People didn't live like that unless they were hiding or running. I want surveillance, he said. Rico and Marco. Have them follow her after work. Discreetly. I want to know where she goes, what route she takes, if anyone's watching her. Elena nodded and left without another word. By nightfall, Rico D'Amato was calling in his first report. Capo, you were right to be concerned. Celio put the call on speaker and poured himself a glass of Nero d'Avola. Tell me. She left the villa at 1804, but she didn't go straight home. She walked 6 blocks north, then doubled back. Took 3 different buses, got off 2 stops early each time, waited to see if anyone followed before boarding the next one. Counter-surveillance, Celio murmured. Exactly, and that's not all. She stopped at a public phone near Piazza Marina, didn't use her mobile, used coins, spoke for maybe 90 seconds, kept looking over her shoulder the whole time. Could you hear what she said? No, but Marco got photos. I'm sending them now. Celio's phone buzzed. He opened the images, grainy but clear enough. Triana at the phone booth, her body language tense, protective. In one shot, her free hand was pressed against her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. Where does she live? Small apartment building in Borgo Vecchio. Old construction, 4 floors, no security. She's on the 3rd floor, corner unit. But here's the thing. Capo. Rico's voice dropped. There's a man. We spotted him after she went inside. He was standing across the street, smoking, watching her window. Stayed there for 20 minutes, then left. Celio's grip tightened on his glass. Description. Tall, maybe 6'1", athletic build, dark jacket, jeans. Couldn't see his face. He kept his collar up, hat pulled low. But the way he was standing there, he knew which window was hers. He's done this before. That's what I thought too. Celio stood and walked to the window, looking out over Palermo's evening lights. Somewhere out there, Triana was in her apartment, probably awake, probably afraid. Do we have footage? Marco's sending it now. Should be in your secure server in 10 minutes. Good. I want eyes on her building tonight, rotating shifts. If that man comes back, I want to know who he is. Capito. What do you want us to do if he approaches her? Celio was quiet for a moment. Nothing yet. Just watch. I need to know what we're dealing with before we move. Understood. The call ended. 20 minutes later, Celio sat in his private study, watching surveillance footage on his laptop. The timestamp read 1847. The video was black and white, shot from Marco's car across the street. There, Triana's window, 3rd floor. The light was on. He could see her shadow moving behind the curtain. Then, at 1852, the man appeared. He stood beneath a street lamp, just outside its full glow. Close enough to watch. Far enough to vanish if needed. He lit a cigarette. And in the brief flare of the lighter, Celio caught a glimpse of his profile. Strong jaw, cold expression. The posture of someone comfortable with violence. Celio's hands curled into fists. The man stayed for 19 minutes, didn't move, didn't look away from her window. When he finally left, he walked with the confidence of someone who'd be back. Celio replayed the footage 3 times, studying every detail, the way the man held himself, the deliberate positioning, the predatory patience. His phone buzzed. Rico, checking in. Celio didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the frozen frame on his screen, the man's shadow stretching across the cobblestones toward Triana's building. Finally, he called Rico back. Capo? Celio's voice was quiet, controlled. but underneath was something colder. "I know fear when I see it," he said, eyes still locked on the screen. "She's not just running from a bad relationship, Rico." He paused, jaw tight. "She's running from something worse than love." Rico called back at midnight with a name. "Officer Matteo Rivas, 34, 8 years, with the Polizia di Stato, currently assigned to—" Rico paused, and Celio could hear the disbelief in his silence. "The Anti-Mafia Task Force." Celio's jaw tightened. "Say that again." "He's anti-mafia, capo, one of the officers who's supposed to be investigating us." The irony was almost poetic, almost. "Send me everything." Within the hour, Celio's desk was covered with documents his people had pulled from databases that were supposed to be secure: police records, social media, financial statements. A career built on headlines and press conferences. Officer Matteo Rivas, decorated for bravery. Task force member, praised for organized crime crackdown. Rivas receives commendation from mayor's office. In every photo, the same chiseled face, the same confident smile. A man who'd built his reputation on being tough on crime. Celio studied a recent picture, Rivas in uniform at a city hall ceremony, shaking hands with Palermo's police commissioner. The camera loved him. The public trusted him, and he was stalking Triana. "There's more," Rico said from the doorway. Celio hadn't heard him enter. "His uncle is Councilor Bruno Rivas. City Planning Commission, close ties to the Interior Ministry, political weight. Protected. From the top down." Rico dropped another folder on the desk. "And look at this. 3 domestic disturbance calls to his address in the past 2 years, all withdrawn before investigation. 2 restraining order requests filed against him, both dismissed." Celio's fingers traced the complaint forms. Different women, same pattern, same outcome. Nothing. "He's done this before," Celio said quietly. "Multiple times, and he keeps getting away with it because the system protects its own." Celio stood and walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over Palermo, painting the sky in shades of gold and blood. "I want everything compiled. Photos of him outside her apartment, timeline of the stalking, the dismissed complaints. Package it anonymously and send it to the Police Internal Affairs Division." Rico hesitated. "Capo, you know they won't." "I know, but we follow protocol first. Let them show us who they really are." 3 days passed. Nothing happened. No investigation, no suspension, no questions asked. Rivas continued showing up for duty, continued appearing at press conferences, continued standing outside Triana's window every 3rd night like he owned the shadows. On the 4th day, Celio called, in a different kind of resource. Luca Santoro, a hacker who owed the Falassi family more favors than he could count. Within 6 hours, Luca had accessed the internal police network and sent Celio something that made his blood run cold. Email chains, internal memos. Worry, complaint against Officer Rivas. Commissioner's note, handle quietly, Bruno's nephew, election year, make it go away. Another memo, dated 2 weeks earlier. IA request, Rivas surveillance allegations. Deputy Chief response, no merit. Complaints credibility questionable, close file. There were 5 more just like them, a pattern of protection, of evidence buried, of women dismissed. The system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed, to protect men like Matteo Rivas. Celio read each memo twice, his anger burning colder with every word. He'd spent years navigating the corruption in Palermo, exploiting it when necessary. But this was different. This wasn't bureaucrats looking the other way while money changed hands. This was the deliberate silencing of victims, the active protection of a predator because he wore a badge and had the right last name. He printed every document, compiled every piece of evidence. Then he locked them in his safe and walked out onto his balcony. The city spread before him, ancient and beautiful and rotten with secrets. Somewhere down there, Triana was working in someone else's home, still hiding her bruises, still looking over her shoulder, still believing the law couldn't save her. She was right. The law wouldn't save her. But Celio would. He gripped the balcony railing, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a declaration of war. Then I'll do their job for them. Behind him, Rico appeared in the doorway. Capo, what are your orders? Celio turned, his expression carved from stone. Get me everyone. The journalist, the banker, the judge, everyone we have leverage on. His eyes were dark, cold, absolute. If the system won't touch Rivas, we'll make sure the entire city does. No violence? Not yet. First, we destroy his shield, his reputation, his protection. Celio's smile was razor thin. Then we let the whole world see exactly what kind of hero Palermo's been worshipping. Rico nodded once and disappeared. Celio remained on the balcony, watching the sun rise over a city that had no idea what was coming. Officer Matteo Rivas had made a mistake. He'd hurt someone under Celio Falasci's protection, and for that, there would be a reckoning. Celio didn't build his empire with violence alone. He built it with information, leverage, and patience. And now, he would dismantle Officer Matteo Rivas the same way. The first call went to Giulia Ferraro, an investigative journalist with La Repubblica Sicilia. 3 years ago, Celio's people had photographed her accepting bribes from a construction firm. The evidence sat in his safe, insurance against a future need. That need was now. I have a story for you, Celio said when she answered, her voice tight with recognition. Corruption in the Polizia di Stato, high-ranking officers burying domestic violence complaints, political protection, cover-ups. Why would I? Because if you don't, those photos from 2021 go to your editor. He paused. But if you do this right, you'll have the biggest story of your career, and the photos disappear forever. Silence. Then, send me what you have. Within 48 hours, Giulia's column carried a carefully worded piece. Questions raised over police accountability in domestic cases. No names yet, just whispers, suggestions, enough to plant seeds of doubt. The second piece fell into place in Naples. Dante Marcello managed a private bank that specialized in clients who valued discretion over legality. He also owed Celio for a shipment problem that had been resolved the previous winter. I need financial records, Celio told him. Officer Matteo Rivas, Palermo Police, offshore accounts, irregular deposits, anything that doesn't match his salary. That could take weeks. You have 3 days. Dante delivered in 2. The records showed exactly what Celio expected. Accounts in the Caymans, monthly deposits that far exceeded a police officer's salary, wire transfers from construction companies under investigation. Rivas wasn't just protected, he was bought. Celio had the documents anonymously couriered to the finance police and copied to Giulia Ferraro. By week's end, another article appeared. Anonymous tip reveals suspicious accounts linked to law enforcement. Still no names, but the net was tightening. The third move was the most delicate. Judge Alessandro Conti had been on the Falasci payroll for 6 years, rubber stamping warrants and burying inconvenient cases. He owed Celio more than money. He owed him his career. There's a domestic violence case, Celio said during their meeting in a private villa outside the city, filed 2 years ago against Officer Matteo Rivas, dismissed on procedural grounds. The judge nodded slowly. You want it reopened? Anonymously. Make it look like a routine review, administrative error, whatever justification you need. And if questions are asked, they won't be. Not if it's handled quietly. 3 days later, the case file was flagged for re-examination. The victim, a woman named Sofia Greco, was contacted by victim services for the first time in 2 years. Celio made sure Julia Ferraro received an anonymous tip about the reopening. Meanwhile, Triana noticed things changing. Small things, strange things. The police car that used to idle on her corner every few nights, the one that made her pull her curtains tight and triple-check her locks, hadn't appeared in over a week. When she walked to the market, the officers who usually ignored her now nodded politely. One even held the door open at the pharmacy, and the man who'd been watching her building, the shadow she'd learned to recognize from 3 blocks away, had vanished. She didn't understand why, but for the first time in months, she slept past midnight without waking in panic. Celio watched it all unfold from his study. Surveillance reports arrived daily. Photos of Rivas leaving the police station, his expression tighter, his shoulders tense. Intercepted phone calls to his uncle, the counselor, demanding to know who was targeting him. Rico stood beside Celio's desk, reviewing the timeline. Julia's preparing another piece. This one names Rivas directly, ties him to the financial irregularities and the reopened case. It will be published tomorrow. Good. The task force commander called him in for questioning this morning. Nothing formal yet, but they're watching him now. Even better, Rico shifted. Some of the men are asking if we should move on him directly. Make him disappear. Send a message. Celio looked up, his eyes cold and clear. No. Capo? No bullets. No blood. Celio's voice was quiet but absolute. We ruin him by daylight. I want the whole city to see what he is. I want his name destroyed, his career ended, his protection stripped away piece by piece. He stood and walked to the window. When we're done, Mateo Rivas won't need to disappear. He'll wish he had. The dam broke on a Tuesday morning. Julia Ferraro's article hit newsstands at dawn. Decorated officer under investigation for corruption, abuse of power. By 8 a.m., every news outlet in Palermo was running the story. But the article was just the beginning. Anonymous emails flooded newsrooms across Sicily, financial records, offshore account statements, copies of buried complaints. Evidence that had been hidden for years suddenly appeared everywhere at once, impossible to ignore. By noon, Corriere della Sera published leaked documents showing Rivas had falsified arrest reports to protect construction's executives, paying him monthly retainers. By 2 p.m., a Naples television station aired an expose on dismissed domestic violence cases. 3 different women, 3 dismissed complaints, all involving the same officer. By evening, the story had gone national. Outside Palermo's questura, crowds began to gather. At first, a dozen people holding handmade signs, "Justice for Victims," and "Who polices the police?" By nightfall, hundreds filled the piazza, chanting, demanding answers. News cameras captured it all. The angry faces, the calls for accountability, the rage of a city that had trusted a monster. Inside his apartment, Mateo Rivas watched his life disintegrate in real time. He called his uncle. Voicemail. He called his commander. Don't contact me until this is sorted. He called his lawyer. I can't help you if the media already convicted you. Then, desperate and unraveling, he called Triana. She was at the villa, folding linens in the 3rd-floor guest room when her phone buzzed. A number she'd changed hers to avoid. A number that still found her. She didn't answer. It buzzed again and again. On the 4th call, her hands shaking, she let it go to voicemail. What she didn't know, Celio's people were recording every word. You did this, didn't you? Rivas's voice was ragged, furious. You think you can run from me? Do you think hiding in Palermo changes anything? I will find you, Triana. I will make you. The message was cut off. Another came through immediately, his voice breaking. Please, just talk to me. We can fix this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just answer the phone. Triana deleted them with trembling fingers. Across the city, Celio's team archived every recording. The final blow came 48 hours later. Anonymous footage surfaced online, security camera video from a bar in Catania dated 8 months prior. The timestamp was clear. So was the image. Officer Mateo Rivas, off duty, dragging a woman out of the bar by her arm. Her resistance. His hand struck her face, her collapse, him walking away. Within hours, the video had 3 million views. By morning, it was on every news channel in Italy. The headline was damning. Is this your hero? Palermo turned on him overnight. The police union released a statement distancing themselves. The mayor called for a full investigation. His commander suspended him pending review. Former colleagues deleted photos with him from social media. Friends stopped answering his calls. Officer Mateo Rivas, once decorated, once trusted, became the most hated man in Sicily. Celio watched it all from his study, a glass of wine in hand, the evening news playing on mute. Footage of the protests. Rivas's photo plastered across the screen with the word "suspended" beneath it. Interviews with victims finally being believed. Rico entered quietly. It's done. He's finished. Celio didn't respond immediately. He simply watched the screen, watched justice delivered not by his hand, but by the truth he'd unleashed. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Justice is louder when it comes from silence. He set down his glass. Now we wait for him to break. Rain lashed the city like a vengeful whip, turning the streets into slick mirrors of neon despair. Rivas hunched in the shadows of a derelict warehouse, his badge long discarded, his world unraveling thread by thread. The suspension order? A scrap of paper he'd crumpled under his boot hours ago. Celio's leaks had stripped him bare. Bank records, ghost accounts, the sordid trail of bribes that led straight to his veins. But it wasn't the job he mourned. It was the power, the fear he'd once commanded. Now, cornered like a rabid dog, he hungered for payback. Triana. Her face haunted him, a loose end that mocked his fall. He'd tailed her for 2 days, a ghost in the downpour. From the cafe where she sketched feverishly, oblivious to the chill seeping through her coat, to the alley where she paused to light a cigarette. Her hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of secrets she carried. Rivas's fingers itched on the steering wheel of his unmarked sedan, the engine's low growl mirroring the storm in his gut. One shot. That's all he needed, to remind her who owned the night. Celio had anticipated this. By dawn, he'd orchestrated her extraction. Clean, silent, like a black ops whisper. 2 unmarked vans converged on her building as she fumbled with her keys, the rain masking the crunch of tires on gravel. Miss Ruiz? Detective Celio requests your company, the lead operative said, his voice flat as slate. Triana froze, umbrella drooping, water pooling at her feet. No sirens, no cuffs, just a firm hand on her elbow, guiding her into the back seat. The safe flat was a nondescript box in the industrial sprawl. Reinforced doors, blackout curtains, a single window overlooking a loading dock. Guards rotated shifts outside, shadows blending with the gloom. She paced the sterile kitchen, steam rising from a forgotten mug of tea. Protected? From what? The word echoed in her skull, a riddle wrapped in Celio's silence. He hadn't called, hadn't explained, only a curt text. Stay put. Trust me. Across town, Celio struck the killing blow. In the dim glow of his laptop, he uploaded the final shard, a grainy audio clip, Rivas's voice thick with graft, haggling kickbacks with his uncle, the silver-haired counselor whose tentacles choked the precinct's budget. Family first, eh, nephew? The old man's laugh crackled through the speakers. Celio hit send to every inbox in the department, anonymous as a phantom. Chaos erupted like a fault line cracking. Phones buzzed in the bullpen, shouts ricocheted off lockers. Loyalists to the uncle barricaded the captain's office, while reformers, Celio's quiet allies, demanded warrants. Fists flew in the parking lot, badges clattering to wet asphalt. The force, once a monolith, splintered into factions, the air thick with betrayal's acrid tang. Triana couldn't wait any longer. She slipped a guard with a feigned migraine and bolted for Celio's precinct, the storm soaking her to the bone. She found him in the archives, poring over files by the desk lamp's harsh halo. "What the hell is this?" she hissed, slamming the door. Her eyes were wild, terror etching lines around them. "Rivas, he's unhinged. I saw him yesterday watching. Please stop. He'll kill you if he knows you're involved." Celio looked up slowly, his face a mask of weathered resolve. Shadows pooling in the hollows of his cheeks. He rose, crossing the room in measured steps, the rain drumming a funeral march on the window. When he spoke, his voice was a quiet blade, slicing through the gale. "He won't touch either of us again." She searched his eyes, finding no bluff, only the steel of a man who'd long ago traded mercy for justice. Triana nodded, a fragile truce, and fled back to her cage. That night, the tempest peaked, thunder rolling like artillery. Rivas's sedan idled at the curb below her building, wipers slashing futile arcs against the deluge. Exhaust fumes curled like specters into the night. He scanned the windows, pulse hammering, a pistol's cold weight in his lap. One floor up, Celio's men ghosted into position, snipers on rooftops, shadows peeling from doorways, radios crackling with lethal precision. The trap jaws creaked shut, unseen, as lightning fractured the sky. The night air hummed with anticipation. 3 buildings down from Triana's apartment, a news van sat dark and idling. Inside, 2 journalists checked their equipment for the 3rd time. Across the street, Detective Mora adjusted her earpiece, her unmarked sedan blending into the row of parked cars. 4 other plainclothes officers positioned themselves at strategic points around the block. Everyone was waiting. Celio had made sure of it. Anonymous tips, leaked evidence, carefully worded suggestions to the right people at the right time. The chess pieces had moved exactly where he needed them. Now, only the final move remained. Rivas sat in his car 2 blocks away, hands trembling on the steering wheel. His phone screen glowed with Triana's last message. "I can't do this anymore. I'm telling them everything." Rage burned through the fog of alcohol. That little bitch. After everything he'd done for her, the money, the protection, keeping her pathetic life from completely falling apart, she was going to destroy him? No. He shoved the car door open and started walking, then jogging, then running. His badge didn't matter. His reputation didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was stopping her before she ruined everything. Triana jumped at the first bang on her door. "Open up!" Rivas's voice cracked through the wood. "I know you're in there." Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone, scrolling frantically. Celio had told her to call him the moment Rivas arrived. "Stay calm," he'd said. "Just follow the plan." Another bang. Harder. "Triana, don't make me break this door down." She pressed the dial. Celio answered on the first ring. "He's here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's trying to get in. Lock yourself in the bathroom," Celio said, his voice steady, calm, like he was discussing the weather. "Don't open the door for anyone except the police. They're already outside. What if he—" The door frame splintered. "Stay quiet," Celio said. "It's almost over." Rivas kicked the door again. The wood cracked. The lock gave way. He stormed inside, scanning the small apartment. "Where are you? We need to talk." The bathroom door was closed. He could hear her crying behind it. "Come out here." He pounded on the bathroom door. "You think you can threaten me? You think anyone will believe a junkie whore over a decorated officer?" Behind him, the apartment's main door swung fully open. Lights exploded. The camera flashes. Shouts. Bodies flooding into the room. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" Rivas spun, his face caught in the harsh glare of phone cameras and professional equipment. Detective Mora stepped forward, her voice hard and clear. "Officer Miguel Rivas, you're under arrest for harassment, breaking and entering, and assault." "What?" He looked around wildly. "This is insane. I'm a police officer. She called me. She's in danger. Save it." Mora nodded to the uniforms. 2 officers grabbed his arms, forcing them behind his back. Handcuffs clicked into place. The journalists captured every second. Phones raised, red recording lights blinking. The hero cop, the decorated officer who'd saved a child from a burning building, now screaming his innocence as he was dragged from a woman's broken doorway. The footage would be online in minutes. Celio watched the live stream on his tablet, wineglass in hand. The villa was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. On the screen, Rivas struggled against the officers, his face contorted with rage and confusion. "This is a setup! Someone set me up!" Celio's expression didn't change. No smile, no satisfaction in his eyes, just the faint clink of crystal as he raised his glass. Checkmate. Palermo woke to scandal. By dawn, every news outlet in the city ran the same headline. Officer Mateo Rivas arrested in a shocking abuse and corruption case. The footage was everywhere. Rivas being dragged from Triana's apartment in handcuffs, his screaming denials, the splintered door behind him. Within hours, more victims came forward, 3 other women who'd been too afraid to speak. The hero cop's carefully constructed image crumbled like ash. The public demanded answers. Who had exposed him? Who had gathered the evidence? The police credited an anonymous whistleblower, someone who'd fed them documentation, testimony, patterns of behavior that made the case airtight. Someone who wanted justice but not recognition. Social media erupted with theories. Journalists dug for names. But the trail went cold at every turn, disappearing into carefully constructed dead ends and encrypted files that led nowhere. Celio Espinar's name never surfaced, not once. 3 days later, Triana stood at the gates of the villa. She'd debated coming. What do you say to a man like him? Thank you for ruining someone's life? Thank you for saving mine? The gates opened before she could press the intercom. She walked the same stone path she'd walked weeks ago, when desperation had driven her here. Now, the desperation had faded, replaced by something quieter. Something like hope. Celio waited in the same room, standing by the same window. He didn't turn when she entered. "The bruises healed," she said softly. "Good." She touched her ribs unconsciously. "The fear hasn't." "It will." He finally looked at her. His expression was unreadable, not cold, not warm, simply present. Fear fades when its source is removed. "Everyone's calling the whistleblower a hero," she said. "They don't know it was you." "They don't need to know." "Doesn't that bother you, not getting credit?" Celio turned back to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The afternoon light cast his silhouette in sharp relief against the glass. "The world doesn't need to know who saved it," he said quietly. "It just needs saving." Triana stood there for a moment, studying him. This man who moved through shadows, who dismantled lives with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of an executioner, who asked for nothing in return except the satisfaction of watching the guilty fall. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't respond, didn't acknowledge the words. She understood. Thanks weren't necessary in his world. Results were all that mattered. As she turned to leave, Celio spoke one last time. "If you ever find yourself in trouble again, Triana, don't wait until you're broken to ask for help." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and left. Night fell over Palermo. Celio stood on his balcony, a glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker to life. From here, Palermo looked peaceful. Beautiful, even. The darkness hid the rot beneath, the corruption, the violence, the 1,000 small cruelties people inflicted on each other every day. But he saw it. He always saw it. Somewhere below, a victim was gathering courage. A predator was growing bold. The scales of justice were tipping toward chaos. And when they did, when the system failed and the innocent suffered, they would whisper his name in the dark. They would come to the villa on the hill. They would ask the devil for salvation, and he would answer. Because Palermo needed him, not the hero the city wanted, but the weapon it deserved. Celio raised his glass to the glowing sprawl below. The city didn't know its quietest protector wore black and sin-like armor. It didn't need to. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a suit.